If you get this diet plan right, you will absolutely achieve a non-diabetic A1C just like me. The principles I'm about to share are the same principles my team and I taught Tina, which led to her dropping her A1C from 10.6% to 5.4%. Raj dropped his A1C from 7.4% to 5.2%. And Heather dropped hers from 9.2 to 5.2. Not by cutting carbohydrates, not by fasting harder, not by finding some obscure supplement, but by understanding the actual physiology of insulin resistance and then systematically removing the cause. Because here's what none of them were told before they found us. Your A1C can drop while eating more whole food carbohydrates, not less. More fruit, more beans, more lentils, more potatoes, more whole grains, more fiber-rich, water-rich, mineral-rich plant foods that feed your cells instead of forcing you into another round of restriction. And I know that sounds almost impossible if you spent years being told carbs turn into sugar, sugar raises your blood sugar, therefore carbs cause diabetes. That sounds logical, but physiologically, it's incomplete. High A1C is not random. It's the result of three things happening at once. First, glucose is sitting in your bloodstream because your muscle cells aren't pulling it in efficiently. Second, your liver is releasing extra glucose, especially overnight, because insulin resistance is giving it the wrong signal. Third, fat has accumulated inside your muscle and liver cells, jamming the very machinery that insulin needs to move glucose where it belongs. Most people only ever hear about the first one. Nobody connects all three, and that's exactly what this video is going to fix. If you want our free step-by-step guide to lowering your A1C without cutting carbohydrates, comment guide below and we'll send you free meal plans that reverse insulin resistance. Now let's get into the physiology, because once you understand this, everything changes. Think of insulin as a key. Your muscle and liver cells are the locks. When those cells are clean and healthy, the key turns easily. Glucose flows in, gets used for energy, and your blood sugar comes right back down. A1C stays low because average blood glucose stays low. The system works exactly as designed. But when excess fat builds up inside those cells, especially intramyocellular fat in muscle and excess fat in the liver, the lock gets sticky. Insulin still shows up, but when it tries to turn the key, the door doesn't open. So glucose stays in your bloodstream longer than it should. Your daily averages creep up, and 3 months later, your A1C reflects that accumulation. That's insulin resistance. And carbohydrates didn't cause it, they revealed it. Think of it this way. Carbohydrates are like rain. Insulin resistance is like a clogged drain. The rain didn't create the clog. It just showed you where the drainage system was blocked. And blaming fruit or potatoes for your high A1C is like blaming the rain for your flooding problem while never touching the drain. This is one of the most important concepts in all of diabetes physiology. And once it lands, the entire conversation about food changes. So what actually clogs the drain? Saturated fat accumulating inside liver and muscle cells, interfering directly with insulin signaling, reducing the ability of glucose to enter your cells and be burned for energy. Diets high in saturated fat worsen this process. Low fat, high fiber, whole food plant-based nutrition reverses it by reducing the fat burden inside those cells and restoring the way insulin communicates. That's the mechanism. Now, let's connect it directly to your A1C. Your A1C measures how much glucose has attached to hemoglobin inside your red blood cells. Since red blood cells live for roughly 3 months, A1C gives you an estimate of your average blood glucose over the entire window. That's why it's used to diagnose prediabetes and diabetes, and why it's the most powerful tool for tracking whether your physiology is genuinely improving. But here's what's exciting. You don't have to wait 3 months to know whether you're moving in the right direction. Many people see fasting glucose, post-meal glucose, energy levels, and digestion begin shifting within days to weeks when they reduce dietary fat, increase fiber-rich whole plant foods, move after meals, sleep better, hydrate consistently, and address stress. A1C reflects the bigger trend, but your daily numbers show you the direction your body is already heading. And here's the part most people miss. When you eat more whole food carbohydrates in a low-fat, high-fiber context, you are not simply adding glucose to the equation. You are changing the environment inside your cells so insulin can work better. Fiber slows digestion. Fiber feeds beneficial gut bacteria. Those bacteria produce short-chain fatty acids that improve insulin sensitivity, strengthen gut barrier function, and reduce inflammation throughout the system. You are not just eating food. You are rebuilding the metabolic ecosystem that A1C responds to. Here's the part of this conversation that almost never gets mentioned, even by doctors who mean well. Glucose regulation is not just about carbohydrates, fat, and insulin. Your body also needs micronutrients to run the machinery. Magnesium, zinc, chromium, selenium, calcium, copper, iron, iodine, and other trace elements all participate directly in glucose metabolism, insulin signaling, antioxidant defense, and mitochondrial function. A review on minerals, trace elements, and their role in diabetes and insulin resistance found that deficiencies, and in some cases imbalances, in several of these nutrients can contribute directly to impaired glucose homeostasis. But here's the reframe that matters. The answer is not to chase a cabinet full of supplements. The most reliable, most comprehensive mineral foundation is food. Beans, lentils, leafy greens, intact whole grains, potatoes, sweet potatoes, fruit, and vegetables deliver minerals packaged with fiber, water, antioxidants, and phytonutrients in a way no supplement can replicate. That package matters. Food is not just chemistry floating in space. Food is information, and whole plant foods send a very different metabolic signal than high-fat, low-fiber, highly processed foods. When you rebuild your diet around these foods, you're not just lowering dietary fat. You're restoring the micronutrient infrastructure that glucose metabolism depends on. Every bean, every leafy green, every intact grain is part of that restoration. This isn't theory. It's been tested in randomized, controlled trials in the real world. A trial published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition studied 99 people with type 2 diabetes over 74 weeks. Researchers compared a low-fat, plant-based diet with conventional diabetes diet recommendations. The low-fat, plant-based group improved glycemia and plasma lipids more than the conventional group, especially when medication changes were accounted for. Why does this matter physiologically? These participants were not told to fear whole food carbohydrates. They were taught to reduce fat, prioritize plant foods, and increase fiber. That combination reduced lipid interference inside cells and improved the body's ability to move glucose from bloodstream to tissue. Then there's the GEICO study, a multi-center, randomized, controlled trial at 10 real-world corporate work sites. Employees with a BMI over 25 or a previous diabetes diagnosis were assigned either to a low-fat vegan nutrition program with weekly support or to make no changes for 18 weeks. The intervention group lost more weight and reduced LDL cholesterol. And among participants with diabetes, A1C fell by about 0.6 percentage points compared with 0.08 in the control group. Among completers, A1C fell 0.7 percentage points compared with 0.1 in controls. Here's why that finding is powerful. This was not a luxury retreat or a tightly controlled metabolic ward. This was normal people living normal lives at their regular jobs, with access to low-fat, plant-based meals and weekly education. When the food environment shifted, glucose control improved. The system responded. And a more recent review on plant-based diets and phytochemicals in diabetes management confirmed the mechanisms behind these results, showing that plant foods support glucose regulation through improved insulin signaling, reduced oxidative stress, modulation of carbohydrate digestion and enzymes, changes in gut microbiota, and anti-inflammatory effects. Type 2 diabetes is not a single switch problem. It's a system problem. Muscle cells, liver cells, gut bacteria, mitochondria, inflammation, hormones, sleep, stress, movement, dietary fat, fiber, minerals, all of these talk to each other. When you give the system the right inputs consistently, the system changes. If you want our free guide on exactly how to build that system, comment guide below. We'll send you the step-by-step Mastering Diabetes framework completely free. Comment guide below. And if you need proof that this works outside a clinical trial, meet the people who lived it. Matteo followed a ketogenic diet for close to a year. His A1C stayed around 6.0 and he felt constantly restricted. After shifting to a low-fat, whole food, plant-based approach through Mastering Diabetes, increasing whole plant carbohydrates and reducing dietary fat, his A1C dropped from 6.0 to 5.4 within a couple of months. His cholesterol and liver enzymes improved at the same time. What Matteo's story tells us is not that he found a magic food. It tells us that when the metabolic environment changes, the same body can respond to carbohydrates in a completely different way. Steve had lived with type 2 diabetes for nearly a decade. Over approximately 112 days, his A1C dropped from 9.3 to 6.2. His fasting glucose dropped from 240 to 85. His weight dropped from 215 to 177 pounds, and his meals included large portions of fruit, leafy greens, brown rice, legumes, and steamed vegetables. Steve did not lower his A1C by making carbohydrates disappear. He lowered it while rebuilding his body's ability to use carbohydrates. Feiji's case study shows us that insulin resistance extends well beyond blood sugar. She had PCOS, significant weight gain, and triglycerides at 442. She had already tried Atkins, low carb, carnivore, calorie restriction, and intermittent fasting. After 4 months in the Mastering Diabetes coaching program, her triglycerides dropped from 442 to 118. She discontinued metformin. Her weight dropped from 200 pounds to 150 over time. PCOS is strongly connected to insulin resistance. When insulin sensitivity improves, the effects ripple outward into triglycerides, weight, energy, hormones, and cycles. Sharon had lived with type 2 diabetes for more than a decade. She had tried doctors, nutritionists, diabetes educators, multiple medications, and diets like Atkins. Her A1C fluctuated between 6.0 and 6.7. After 2 months in the Mastering Diabetes coaching program, her A1C dropped from 6.7 to 5.7. Fasting glucose moved from the 130s into the 80s and 90s, and she lost 17 pounds. The pattern is the same every time. Not carb restriction, insulin sensitivity restoration. Here's what this looks like in real life. No perfection required, just consistency. Breakfast should be high in fiber and low in fat. Oatmeal with berries and a banana. A fruit bowl with ground flax. A starch-centered meal with fruits or vegetables. The key is what you don't add. No large amounts of nut butter, coconut oil, butter, or cream on top. Those fats don't make the meal healthier. They contribute to the intracellular congestion that keeps insulin resistance in place. After breakfast, take a 10 to 15 minute easy walk. This is not just a random hack. Muscle contraction activates glucose uptake through a pathway that operates independently of insulin, opening a side door into muscle cells that works even when the door is still sticky. You eat, glucose enters the blood, your muscles move, the glucose has somewhere to go. Lunch should be anchored by legumes, beans or lentils with brown rice or potatoes, leafy greens, vegetables, salsa, herbs, and vinegar. Keep added fats low. Make it abundant. Make it colorful. Make it genuinely satisfying, because satiety matters, and these foods deliver it without the fat burden that worsens insulin resistance. Then move again. Even a short walk, light cycling, or a few minutes of gentle movement at your desk helps muscles act as a glucose vacuum during the window when post-meal glucose is still climbing. Dinner is where most people underestimate their opportunity. Evening insulin sensitivity is naturally lower, and what happens after dinner directly influences your overnight glucose and your fasting number the next morning. Keep dinner low fat, high fiber, and whole food. A bowl of black beans, leafy greens, sweet potatoes, and vegetables. A lentil soup with intact whole grains. Then walk for 10 to 20 minutes before the evening ends. Not punishment, not exercise as a tax for eating, just pure physiology improving your blood sugar. Now let's zoom out, because the most powerful message here is bigger than any single meal. Low-fat, plant-based, whole food nutrition reduces the intramyocellular and hepatic fat that jams insulin signaling, directly addressing the root cause of high A1C at the cellular level. High fiber carbohydrates feed beneficial gut bacteria, produce short-chain fatty acids, and rebuild the metabolic ecosystem that insulin sensitivity depends on. Mineral-rich plant foods supply the micronutrient infrastructure that glucose metabolism, antioxidant defense, and insulin signaling all require to function properly. Post-meal movement activates contraction-mediated glucose uptake, opening a side door for glucose disposal that works even when insulin's main pathway is impaired. And consistent daily practice, not perfection, not restriction, not fear, is what allows A1C to trend downward over weeks and months until it reflects a body that has genuinely healed. None of this works because it hacks your blood sugar. It works because it removes the reasons blood sugar is high in the first place. So if your glucose rose after eating fruit, oatmeal, rice, or potatoes, don't conclude those foods caused your disease. Ask a better question. Why is my body struggling to move glucose into my cells right now? That question leads you straight to the root cause. And the root cause is insulin resistance. You don't need another extreme diet. You need muscle cells that can hear insulin again. You need a liver that stops overproducing glucose overnight. You need fiber, movement, hydration, sleep, and low-fat, whole plant foods that help your cells become clean, responsive, and ready to use glucose for energy. That is the path forward. And Tina, Raj, Heather, Mateo, Steve, Feiji, and Sharon are all proof that it's a real path, not a theory. If you want our free guide to start walking it, comment guide below. If this video helped you, hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and share it with someone who's been told the only way to lower their A1C is to eat less carbohydrate. Until next time, keep those carbs high and that A1C low.